The courtroom hummed with a voltage that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with bloodsport. News cameras pressed against the gallery windows like hungry wolves. Spectators craned forward in their seats, some with hate blazing in their eyes, others with the hollow satisfaction that comes from watching a monster finally caged. This was the trial everyone had been waiting for. Damian Rourke, the Rourke family enforcer, accused of kidnapping 3-year-old Lily Parker after executing her parents in a botched gang hit. The prosecution's case was simple. Damian Rourke was a violent predator with a 20-year rap sheet. He'd been spotted at the scene. The child had vanished for 18 hours before being found wandering near his known safe house. The defense had nothing. No alibi. No alternative theory. Just a tattooed killer in chains who refused to speak. Judge Thomas Briggs sat elevated above it all, adjusting his robe with the casual confidence of a man who viewed his trials as theater and himself as the star. He'd already granted 3 interviews that morning. His eyes swept the gallery with practiced authority, landing briefly on the defendant. Damian Rourke sat motionless at the defense table, his scarred hands shackled to a belt chain, ink-black tattoos crawling up his neck like accusations written on skin. His face was stone. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at his attorney. He simply stared at the empty witness stand as though he'd already accepted his sentence. Judge Briggs smirked. This would be over by lunch. The heavy oak doors at the rear of the courtroom groaned open. Silence dropped like a guillotine blade. A small figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by the harsh fluorescent lighting of the hallway. Lily Parker, 3 years old, blonde hair pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, one ribbon already sliding loose. She wore a white dress with tiny flowers embroidered along the hem, the kind of outfit meant to make her look innocent, safe, untouchable. In her arms, she clutched a brown teddy bear with button eyes, its fur matted from constant handling. Behind her stood a victim advocate, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who gently guided Lily forward with a hand on her shoulder. The child's steps were hesitant, her small shoes making no sound on the polished floor. Her eyes were wide, taking in the high ceilings, the rows of staring faces, the American flag hanging limply in the corner. She looked like a sparrow that had wandered into a cathedral. The gallery collectively held its breath. Even the reporters stopped typing. Lily's gaze swept across the room, confused and searching, until it landed on the defense table. On him, Damian Rourke, the monster, the kidnapper, the man covered in scars and tattoos who looked like every nightmare a parent warns their child about. Something flickered across Lily's face. Not fear, something else. Something the courtroom couldn't name. Judge Briggs cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the microphone. Will the witness approach the stand? The advocate nodded encouragingly and walked Lily toward the witness box. It loomed above the child like a fortress wall. The wooden chair was built for adults, its seat high enough that Lily would need to be lifted. The advocate bent down, whispering something reassuring, then helped Lily place one small foot on the step. Lily grabbed the armrest with both hands, the teddy bear dangling from her wrist. She tried to pull herself up, but her arms weren't strong enough. She slipped backward, her dress catching on the edge. A titter of nervous laughter rippled through the gallery. Judge Briggs leaned into his microphone, his voice dripping with theatrical impatience. Does the witness need a booster seat? Perhaps we should break for nap time. The courtroom erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Some spectators covered their mouths. Others didn't bother hiding their amusement. The court reporter's fingers paused over her keyboard. Even the prosecutor, a severe woman named Catherine Marsh, allowed herself the ghost of a smile. Lily froze halfway onto the chair, her face flushing red. Her small fingers tightened around the teddy bear. Her breath came faster, chest rising and falling beneath the white dress. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, catching the overhead lights. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Damian Rourke moved, his jaw clenched. His shackled hands shifted slightly on the table, chains clinking. His dark eyes, which had been empty moments before, now burned with something raw and dangerous. But he said nothing, he did nothing. He simply stared at Judge Briggs with an intensity that could shatter glass. The advocate finally lifted Lily into the chair. The child sat perched on the edge, her legs dangling uselessly, her arms wrapped around the teddy bear like it was the only solid thing in the world. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "There we go," Judge Briggs said with false cheer, tapping his gavel once. "Now, let's get this over with, shall we?" Prosecutor Marsh stood, smoothing her blazer. She'd built her career on cases like this, putting monsters away. She approached the witness stand with the measured confidence of someone who'd already won. "Lily," she began, her voice softening in that practiced way adults use with frightened children. "I know this is scary, but I need you to be very brave for me. Can you do that?" Lily didn't respond. She stared down at the teddy bear in her lap, her fingers tracing its worn ears. "Lily, look at me, sweetheart." Marsh's voice sharpened slightly. The child didn't move. Marsh glanced toward the judge, who waved his hand impatiently. "Get on with it." Marsh took a breath and shifted her approach. "Lily, do you see the man sitting at that table?" She gestured toward Damian Rourke. "The man with the tattoos. Can you look at him for me?" Lily's hand stilled on the teddy bear. "I need you to tell everyone here what that man did. Did he hurt you? Did he scare you?" The courtroom waited. Slowly, as if moving through water, Lily lifted her head. Her tear-streaked face turned toward the defense table, toward Damian Rourke. Their eyes met across the room, a child barely old enough to speak in full sentences and a man the world had already condemned. And then Lily did something no one expected. She stopped crying. Her small hand released the teddy bear, letting it fall to her lap. Her arm rose, trembling but deliberate. Her finger extended, pointing directly at Damian Rourke. Judge Briggs leaned forward, his smirk returning. The jury sat up straighter. Prosecutor Marsh allowed herself a breath of victory, but Lily wasn't finished. Her voice, small but clear, cut through the silence like a blade through silk. "He's the one who saved me." The courtroom exploded. Judge Briggs's gavel came down like thunder. "Order! Order!" Marsh's face went white. The defense attorney shot to her feet, mouth open but no words coming out. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The gallery erupted in shouts, some confused, some outraged, some desperate to hear more. And in the center of it all, Damian Rourke closed his eyes, his shoulders sagged slightly, his shackled hands unclenched. For just a moment, the monster everyone feared looked almost human, almost broken. Lily's finger remained pointed at him, steady now, her face still wet with tears, but her voice growing stronger. "He hid me. He stopped the loud man." Marsh found her voice. "Lily, honey, I don't think you understand. The loud man hurt Mommy." Lily's hand shifted, her finger now sweeping across the room, past the jury, past the gallery, landing on a figure standing near the back. A man in a dark suit with a detective's badge clipped to his belt. His hand rested casually on his hip, close to his service weapon. Detective Michael Carver, lead investigator on the case, the prosecution's star witness. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the courtroom. "He has the scary eyes." 20 minutes earlier, in the holding cell beneath the courtroom, Sarah Vance had been losing a battle she'd fought for 3 weeks straight. "Damian, for God's sake, let me do my job." She stood with her briefcase open on the metal table. Legal documents fanned out like weapons she wasn't allowed to use. Her voice echoed off the concrete walls, desperation bleeding through her professional composure. "I have witnesses. I have security footage placing you 6 blocks away when the initial shots were fired. I have forensic evidence that proves you didn't pull the trigger on either parent. We can win this." Damian sat on the bench bolted to the wall, his shackled hands resting on his knees. He looked at her with the same empty expression he'd worn for weeks. No anger, no fear, just a terrible, resigned calm that made Sarah want to scream. "No," he said quietly. "No?" Sarah slammed her hand on the table. "That's it? That's all you're giving me? You're going to let them send you to prison for life for something you didn't do?" "Yes." Sarah paced the narrow space, her heels clicking against the floor. "You saved that little girl, Damian. You risked your life to pull her out of that apartment while whoever really did this was still shooting. You kept her alive for 18 hours until you could get her somewhere safe. You're a hero, and you're acting like, I'm acting like a man who knows what happens to snitches. Damien's voice was still quiet, but something sharp cut through it now. His eyes lifted to meet hers, and for the first time, Sarah saw the weight he was carrying. You think this ends with a verdict? The people who did this, they're not in custody. They're out there, watching, waiting to see if I talk. Sarah's anger faltered. You think they'll come after you in prison? I don't care what they do to me. Damien leaned forward, chains clinking. But that little girl's in foster care right now with an address I could find in 20 minutes. So could they. If I fight this, if I name names, if I expose who really ordered the hit on her parents, Lily becomes a liability, a loose end. The cell fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Sarah sank into the chair across from him, her legal arguments crumbling into dust. So you're just going to take the fall, become the monster everyone already thinks you are. Better a monster in a cage than a dead man with a dead child on his conscience. Damien's scarred hands clenched into fists. Let them hate me, Sarah. Let them lock me up and throw away the key. As long as she gets to grow up, I don't care what they call me. Sarah stared at him, seeing the truth she'd been denying. This wasn't a case about evidence or reasonable doubt. This was a man choosing damnation to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. You're killing your own life, she whispered. Damien's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Better mine than hers. The bailiff's knock echoed through the cell. 5 minutes, counselor. They're ready for you upstairs. Sarah gathered her useless documents with trembling hands, knowing she was about to walk into a courtroom and watch a good man be crucified. She paused at the door, looking back at Damien one last time. I hope she remembers, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I hope when she's older, she remembers what you did for her. Damien looked down at his chains. I hope she forgets. Judge Thomas Briggs had chosen his tie that morning with the same care a general might select a medal. Navy blue with thin silver stripes. Authoritative but approachable. Presidential even. He'd stood in front of his bathroom mirror for a full 3 minutes, adjusting the knot, practicing his stern but fair expression, the one that photographed well. This trial was going to make his career. He could already see the headline. Judge Briggs brings down mafia enforcer in heartbreaking child kidnapping case. Maybe he'd write a book. Justice for the innocent, one judge's fight against organized crime. He'd secured a prime parking spot that morning and made sure to arrive exactly when the news vans were setting up. 3 reporters had asked for quotes. He'd given them sound bites that would play beautifully on the evening broadcast. Now, settling into his elevated chair, Briggs let his eyes sweep across the packed courtroom with practiced satisfaction. Every seat filled, standing room only, the kind of audience that made even routine objections feel theatrical. He adjusted his robe, made sure the American flag was properly positioned behind him for the camera angles, and tapped his gavel once. Court is now in session. His voice boomed through the sound system with just the right amount of gravitas. He glanced toward the defense table where Sarah Vance sat with a stack of motions that had been filed the previous week. He hadn't read them. Didn't need to. Your Honor, Sarah stood, her voice tight. Before we begin, the defense has several motions that require denied. Briggs waved his hand dismissively, not even looking at the documents. Sarah's jaw clenched. Your Honor, with respect, these motions address critical issues of evidence, admissibility, and witness testimony. If the court would just review, Ms. Vance, Briggs leaned into his microphone, his tone dripping with condescension. I've been presiding over criminal cases since before you passed the bar. I'm quite capable of determining what requires my attention. Your motions are noted and denied. Let's move forward. A few chuckles rippled through the gallery. Briggs allowed himself a small smile. The jury was watching. They loved a judge who didn't waste time on legal gymnastics. Sarah remained standing, her knuckles white against the table. Your Honor, one of these motions concerns the defendant's right to... Counselor. Briggs's smile vanished. Sit down now, or I'll hold you in contempt, and your client can represent himself. How does that sound? The threat hung in the air. Sarah slowly sank back into her chair, fury radiating from every rigid line of her body. Damien placed a hand on her arm, shaking his head slowly. Let it go. Briggs turned to the prosecutor's table, his warm expression returning. Ms. Marsh, is the prosecution ready to proceed? Catherine Marsh stood, smooth and confident. Yes, Your Honor. The state calls its first witness. Excellent. Briggs settled back in his chair, already thinking about the press conference he'd scheduled for after the verdict. This was going to be a formality, a monster in chains, a traumatized child witness, and a justice system that worked exactly as designed, open and shut. He checked his reflection in the dark screen of his computer monitor, making sure his hair was still perfectly in place. It was going to be a very good day. If you believe judges should serve justice, not their careers, hit that subscribe button. Only corrupt officials like Briggs wouldn't want you to hear the truth. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of the courtroom. The state calls Lily Parker to the stand. Every head turned toward the double doors at the back. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched, taut as a wire about to snap. Then the doors creaked open, slow and heavy, revealing a slice of the fluorescent-lit hallway beyond. Lily appeared in the gap, so small she was almost swallowed by the doorframe. 3 years old, maybe 30 pounds soaking wet. Her blonde hair had been brushed into 2 pigtails, but one ribbon had already come loose, hanging limply against her shoulder. She wore the white dress with tiny embroidered flowers that someone from victim services had picked out, probably thinking it would make her look innocent and sympathetic. It did, but it also made her look impossibly fragile, like a porcelain doll that might shatter if anyone breathed too hard. Behind her stood Mrs. Chen, the victim advocate assigned to her case, a kind woman with soft eyes and a gentle voice who had spent the last hour trying to prepare a toddler for something no child should ever have to face. Mrs. Chen placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, encouraging her forward, but Lily's feet stayed rooted to the threshold. The courtroom stretched out before her like a cathedral built to crush small things. 30-foot ceilings, dark wood paneling that climbed the walls like prison bars, rows upon rows of adult faces, all turned toward her, all watching. The judge sat high above everything else, elevated on his bench like a king on a throne. The jury box loomed to one side, 12 strangers packed shoulder to shoulder. Every surface was hard, marble, oak, leather. Nothing soft, nothing safe. Lily's arms tightened around the teddy bear pressed against her chest. It was brown and worn, one button eye hanging by a thread, its fur matted from being held too tightly for too long. The stuffing in one ear had shifted, making it flop to the side. Someone had tied a small red ribbon around its neck, maybe trying to make it look presentable for court. It didn't help. What the courtroom didn't know, what no one knew except Lily, was where that bear had come from. She'd been holding it when the police found her, wandering in an alley 18 hours after her parents were shot. When the detectives asked where she got it, she couldn't answer. She hadn't spoken since that night. The bear had been logged into evidence, tested for DNA, photographed from every angle, then returned to her because child psychologists said taking it away would cause more trauma. No one questioned why a kidnapper would give his victim a teddy bear. No one thought to check the store receipt still tucked inside its tag. No one knew that Damian Rourke had bought it at a 24-hour drugstore at 3 in the morning while Lily shivered in his truck, using the last of his cash because she wouldn't stop crying for her mother. Lily clutched that bear now like it was the only real thing in a room full of nightmares. Her eyes were wide, blue and glassy, darting from face to face, looking for something familiar, something safe. She found only strangers, hundreds of them, all staring. Mrs. Chen whispered something encouraging and gently guided Lily forward. The little girl took one hesitant step, then another. Her white shoes made no sound on the polished floor. She looked even smaller in motion, dwarfed by the enormous space, a single fragile leaf drifting through a canyon. Damien sat perfectly still at the defense table, his shackled hands pressed flat against the wood. His jaw was locked so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. He didn't look at Lily directly, couldn't, without drawing attention, but his eyes tracked her peripheral movement. Every protective instinct in his body screamed at him to stand up, to shield her, to carry her out of this place. But he couldn't. All he could do was sit there, chained and helpless, and watch her walk toward the witness stand alone. Mrs. Chen guided Lily to the witness box, her hands still resting protectively on the child's shoulder. The wooden structure loomed above them both, built for adults with adult legs and adult reach. The chair itself sat elevated, accessible only by a single wooden step that came up to Lily's chest. "Can you climb up for me, sweetheart?" Mrs. Chen whispered, her voice gentle but strained. She knew what was coming. They all did. Leslie stared up at the chair like it was a mountain. She shifted the teddy bear to one arm, gripping it tightly against her ribs, and reached up with her free hand. Her small fingers barely grasped the armrest. She placed one white shoe on the step, trying to pull herself up the way she'd seen grown-ups do. Her arms weren't strong enough. Her foot slipped. She stumbled backward, catching herself against Mrs. Chen's legs. The teddy bear tumbled from her grip, hitting the floor with a soft thud. A nervous titter rippled through the gallery. Someone in the back row coughed to cover a laugh. Lily's face flushed red. She bent down quickly, scooping up the bear and clutching it to her chest like a shield. Her bottom lip trembled. She tried again, this time using both hands on the armrest. The bear wedged awkwardly under one elbow. She managed to get one knee onto the step, her white dress bunching up around her legs. Then she slipped again. This time the laughter was louder, less nervous, more open. Someone in the third row actually chuckled out loud. A juror in the front box pressed his lips together, suppressing a smile. Judge Briggs leaned forward into his microphone, his voice booming through the speakers with theatrical timing. "Does the witness need a booster seat?" He paused, letting the courtroom absorb his wit. "Perhaps we should break for nap time and try this again after snack and juice boxes." The gallery erupted. Full, unrestrained laughter rolled through the courtroom like a wave. Reporters grinned. Spectators nudged each other. Even the court clerk allowed herself a smirk. Judge Briggs sat back in his chair, clearly pleased with himself, soaking in the reaction like applause. Lily froze halfway between standing and climbing, her small body rigid with humiliation. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over and running down her flushed cheeks. Her hands shook as they gripped the teddy bear. She looked out at the sea of laughing faces. Adults, all of them, every single one bigger and louder and crueler than anything she could comprehend. She was alone, completely, utterly alone in a room full of people who thought her suffering was funny. Mrs. Chen's face had gone pale. She quickly lifted Lily under the arms, hoisting her into the chair without another word. Lily sat perched on the edge, her legs dangling uselessly, her arms wrapped so tightly around the bear that her knuckles went white. Tears streamed silently down her face, dripping onto the white fabric of her dress, leaving dark spots like tiny wounds. The laughter died down gradually, people clearing their throats and adjusting in their seats, pretending they hadn't just mocked a traumatized toddler. Judge Briggs tapped his gavel once, casually as if he hadn't just turned a child's terror into entertainment. "There we go," he said brightly. "Now let's get this show on the road, shall we?" At the defense table, something in Damian Rourke broke. His shackled hands clenched into fists so tight the chains bit into his wrists. His breathing came harder, faster. His eyes, which had been carefully empty for weeks, now burned with a rage so pure it was almost visible. He stared at Judge Briggs with an intensity that could melt steel. Sarah Vance put a warning hand on his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Please. Not now." Damian's voice came out low and rough, meant only for her. "If I ever get out of these chains, you won't get the chance if you lose control now." He forced himself to look away from the judge, forced himself to breathe. But his hands stayed clenched, the metal cutting deeper. "If you can't stand adults who mock traumatized children, smash that like button. Only heartless bullies like Judge Briggs would find this funny." Catherine Marsh approached the witness stand with the confidence of a woman who had shattered bigger obstacles than a frightened toddler. She'd built her reputation on high-profile convictions, on breaking witnesses who thought they could stay silent, on extracting truth from people who'd spent their entire lives learning how to lie. A 3-year-old child should have been easy. She softened her voice first, the way the training manual suggested. "Lily, honey, I know you're scared, but I need you to be very brave for me, okay?" She leaned against the witness box, trying to appear less threatening. "Can you tell us what happened the night your mommy got hurt?" Lily stared down at the teddy bear in her lap, her fingers tracing its worn ears over and over in a rhythm that looked almost meditative. Her lips stayed pressed together. She didn't look up. Marcia's smile tightened. She glanced toward Judge Briggs, who made an impatient rolling gesture with his hand. Get on with it. Lily, Marcia's voice sharpened. You need to answer my questions. Do you understand? The judge needs you to talk. Still nothing, just the rhythmic stroking of the bear's ear. Marsh straightened, abandoning the gentle approach. Her voice rose, filling the courtroom. Lily, look at me right now. The child flinched but didn't raise her head. Do you see that man sitting over there? Marsh pointed dramatically toward the defense table. The man with all the tattoos and the scars? The scary-looking man in chains? Lily's breathing quickened. Her small chest rose and fell faster beneath the white dress. Look at him! Marsh's voice cracked like a whip. Look at the monster who took you. Look at him and tell everyone in this courtroom what he did to you. Lily's breathing turned rapid and shallow, hyperventilating. Her fingers stopped moving on the bear. Her whole body started to shake, a tremor that began in her hands and spread through her tiny frame like an earthquake. The tears that had been streaming silently now came with small, choked gasps. Tell us! Marsh pressed harder, sensing victory in the child's breaking composure. Did he hurt you? Did he scare you? Did he? Ms. Marsh, Sarah Vance was on her feet. Your Honor, this is badgering a 3-year-old witness. The prosecution is traumatizing. Overruled, Judge Briggs waved dismissively. The witness needs to answer. Continue, Ms. Marsh. Marsh moved closer, her shadow falling over Lily's chair. Look at him right now, Lily. Look at the bad man who… And Lily looked. Not at Marsh, past her, across the courtroom to the defense table where Damian Rourke sat in his chains. Their eyes met. The courtroom noise, the murmurs, the rustling papers, the bailiff's radio, the air conditioning hum, all of it seemed to fade into static. For Lily, there was only that face, scarred, tattooed, hard, the face everyone called a monster, the face that had haunted the news for weeks, the face that should have terrified her. But she wasn't looking at a monster. She was looking at the man who'd wrapped his jacket around her when she was shivering, who'd bought her a teddy bear at 3 a.m. because she wouldn't stop crying, who'd sung to her, badly, off-key, but gently until she fell asleep in his truck, who'd told her everything would be okay even when he knew it wouldn't be. Her breathing was still rapid, panicked, out of control. She was drowning in front of everyone. Damian's jaw unclenched slightly. His eyes, which had been hard as stone for everyone else, softened just for her. He gave the smallest movement, barely a nod, more like a thought of a nod, so subtle no one else would notice. But Lily saw it. Breathe, it said. Just breathe. I'm here. Lily's chest hitched once, twice. Then slowly, impossibly, her breathing began to steady. The shaking in her hands eased. The tears still fell, but the panic receded like a wave pulling back from shore. The courtroom came back into focus. Marsh was still talking, demanding answers. The judge was leaning forward. The jury was riveting. But none of it mattered, because at that moment, Lily wasn't alone anymore. She had found the one safe thing in the entire room, and he was supposed to be the monster. Lily's tears stopped, not gradually, not with the hiccuping slowness of a child winding down from a tantrum. They just stopped. Her face, which had been crumpled and red and wet with fear, smoothed into something else. Something clear. Something certain. Catherine Marsh noticed the change and pressed forward, sensing the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. That's right, Lily. You see him, don't you? You remember. The courtroom held its collective breath. Reporters leaned forward in their seats. Jurors straightened. Even the bailiff stopped his subtle shifting and stood perfectly still. Lily released her death grip on the teddy bear, letting it rest in her lap. Her small hands came free, one rising slowly from her side. Her arm extended, trembling slightly but deliberately. Her finger pointed across the expanse of polished wood and marble and prejudice, cutting through the space like an arrow finding its target. Straight at Damian Rourke. Yes! Marsh couldn't contain the triumph in her voice. She turned to the jury, her expression vindicated. Let the record show the witness has identified the defendant. Judge Briggs leaned back in his chair, his smirk spreading across his face like oil on water. Finally, he muttered into the microphone, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. Some progress. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Vindication rippled through the rows of spectators. Several people nodded to each other as if they had known all along. A woman in the fourth row whispered loudly, "I knew it. Monster like that doesn't save anybody." Sarah Vance's face went ashen. She looked at Damien, her mouth opening to say something, anything, but no words came. All her arguments, all her evidence, all her desperate attempts to make him fight, they crumbled to dust in the face of that pointing finger. At the defense table, Damien Rourke closed his eyes. His scarred hands, still shackled, relaxed against the wood. The tension that had coiled through his body for the entire trial released all at once, leaving him looking almost peaceful, resigned. He didn't fight, didn't protest, didn't shake his head or mouth denials or show any of the shock an innocent man might display. He simply accepted it. This was always how it was going to end. A 3-year-old child pointing at the tattooed monster, the jury believing what they could see, the system confirming what it had already decided. He'd made his choice in that holding cell 20 minutes ago, Lily's safety over his freedom. If this was the price, he'd pay it. Let them lock him away forever, as long as she survived. Sarah grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. "Damien, say something. Tell them she's wrong. Tell them it's okay." His voice was barely a whisper. "Let it go." In the gallery, someone started a slow clap. Others joined. Applause for justice served, for a child finding her voice, for a monster finally being identified by his victim. The sound built and built, filling the courtroom with the percussion of victory. Judge Briggs didn't stop it. He sat there, basking in it, already composing his statement for the press conference. This was the moment, the turning point, the dramatic testimony that would define his legacy. Catherine Marsh turned back to Lily, ready to extract more details, to seal the conviction with the child's own words. "Lily, honey, can you tell everyone what that man did to—" But Lily wasn't finished. Her arm was still extended, her finger still pointing. But her face had changed again. The certainty was still there, but something else came with it now. Something that didn't match the narrative everyone had constructed. Her eyes, locked on Damien's closed ones, filled with something that looked nothing like fear. It looked like gratitude. Her small voice cut through the dying applause, quiet but carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "That's the daddy bear." The clapping stopped. Judge Briggs's smirk froze. Catherine Marsh's triumph turned to confusion in the space of a heartbeat, and in the gallery, the first whisper of doubt began to spread like cracks in ice. The courtroom existed in a state of suspended animation. No one moved. No one breathed. The word hung in the air like smoke, refusing to dissipate. Daddy Bear. Catherine Marsh's face cycled through confusion, then denial, then something approaching panic. "Lily, sweetheart, I don't think you understand the question. This man," she gestured sharply toward Damien, "this is the person who—" "He's the daddy bear," Lily repeated, her voice stronger now. She pulled the teddy bear from her lap and held it up, showing the courtroom like evidence. "He gave me this when I was cold." The murmurs started low, a tremor of uncertainty rippling through the gallery. Marsh's professional composure cracked. "Your Honor, the child is clearly confused. She's been traumatized and he hid me under his coat." Lily's words came faster now, tumbling out like water through a broken dam. She was still pointing at Damien, but her finger had stopped trembling. "When the loud man was shooting, he made me very small and covered me up so the loud man couldn't see." Judge Briggs's smirk vanished. His hand moved toward the gavel, but stopped halfway, frozen in uncertainty. Sarah Vance was on her feet, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. She just stared at Lily with an expression caught between hope and disbelief. Damien's eyes opened. For the first time since the trial began, something like fear crossed his face. Not fear for himself, fear for what Lily was about to reveal. Fear for what speaking the truth might cost her. "Lily," Marsh's voice shook slightly. She knelt beside the witness box, trying to regain control. "You need to be very careful about what you're saying. This man is accused of hurting your mother, of taking you away from—" He didn't hurt Mommy. Lily's voice cut through the courtroom like a bell. Clear, certain, unshakable. He stopped the bleeding. The courtroom exploded. Shouts erupted from the gallery. Reporters scrambled for their phones. A juror stood up, then sat back down, then stood again. Judge Briggs slammed his gavel 3 times. 4 times, 5 times, the crack of wood on wood barely audible over the chaos. Order! I will have order in this court. But order was a lie now. Order had been built on a foundation of assumptions, and Lily Parker had just taken a sledgehammer to the cornerstone. Sarah Vance found her voice. Your Honor, I move for an immediate recess, so motion denied. Briggs's face had gone red. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't the narrative. This wasn't the career-making trial he'd imagined. The witness will clarify her statement immediately. Marsh stood frozen, her case disintegrating in real time. She looked at her notes, at the evidence folders, at the timeline she'd spent weeks constructing. All of it depended on Damian Rourke being the villain. All of it required Lily to be his victim. Lily, Marsh's voice was barely steady. When you say he stopped the bleeding, what do you... He pressed on Mommy's tummy. Lily made a pushing motion with her small hands, really hard. He told me to close my eyes, but I saw. There was lots of red. He kept saying, stay with me, to Mommy, but she wouldn't wake up. The gallery had gone silent again, but it was a different silence now. Not anticipation, horror. And then he picked me up and ran. The loud man was chasing us. Daddy Bear ran really fast and hid me in his truck. He gave me the bear and told me to stay quiet like a mouse. Judge Briggs' face had drained of color. His eyes darted to the prosecutor's table, to the gallery, to anywhere but the small child systematically destroying his verdict. Damian sat perfectly still, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. Tears had started running down his scarred face, cutting tracks through 20 years of carefully maintained armor. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't hide them. He just sat there, shackled and broken, and vindicated all at once. He saved me, Lily said quietly, her finger still pointing at the man the world had called a monster. The loud man wanted to hurt me too, but Daddy Bear wouldn't let him. What do you think really happened that night? Drop your theory in the comments. Sarah Vance moved before the judge could bang his gavel again. She stepped closer to the witness box, ignoring the bailiff moving to intercept her. Her voice trembled, but it was loud enough to slice through the suffocating noise of the gallery. Lily, look at me. If Damian didn't do it, who is the loud man? Who hurt your mommy? Lily didn't hesitate. She turned her small body, shifting her aim from the defense table to the back of the courtroom. Her finger swept past the jury, past the rows of stunned reporters, and locked onto a figure standing by the double doors. Him, she whispered. Then louder with a child's terrifying clarity. The loud man! He has the scary eyes! Every head in the room whipped around. They landed on Detective Michael Carver, the lead investigator, the hero cop who had built the case against Damian. He stood frozen, his hand resting casually on his belt, but his face had gone the color of ash. He yelled at Mommy, Lily said, her voice rising, trembling with a memory too big for her body. He made a loud noise and Mommy fell down. Carver's eyes darted around the room. He saw the realization hitting the other officers. He saw Judge Briggs' mouth drop open. The mask slipped. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the desperate, feral look of a trapped animal. His hand moved, not to his badge, but to the service weapon at his hip. The snap of the retention holster echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Gun! A bailiff shouted, diving for cover. But Damian was faster. The man who had sat like a stone statue for 3 weeks exploded into motion. He didn't run away from the danger. He ran toward the child. With a roar that shook the walls, Damian vaulted over the defense table, the heavy chain snapping taut but failing to hold back his momentum. Carver drew his weapon, leveling the barrel at the witness stand. Damian didn't check his stride. He threw himself into the line of fire, a wall of orange jumpsuit and tattooed muscle. He crashed into the witness box, curling his massive frame around Lily, offering his back to the shooter just as the deafening crack of a gunshot shattered the courtroom. If you think true heroes are defined by their actions and not their tattoos, share this story right now. The gunshot shattered the witness stand, sending sharp splinters of oak flying into the air. But Damien didn't flinch. He didn't check his own body for wounds. He simply curled tighter around the trembling child, his massive back acting as a shield against the world. Before Detective Carver could rack the slide for a second shot, the bailiffs hit him like a tidal wave. 3 officers drove the traitor into the floor, the impact echoing through the silent room. The guns skittered across the polished tile, sliding to a stop at Sarah Vance's feet. Sarah snatched up the detective's phone, which had fallen in the struggle. Her fingers flew across the cracked screen. "Your Honor!" Her voice broke, raw with vindication. "The GPS history is right here. 9:42 p.m., the night of the murders." His phone pinged inside the Parker residence. The realization hit the courtroom with the force of a physical blow. Judge Briggs stared at the detective being dragged away in handcuffs, the man he had trusted, and then at the monster in the witness box who had just risked his life for a child. The judge's arrogance evaporated, leaving only a pale, trembling shame. "Unshackle him," Briggs whispered. Then louder, his voice cracking. "Unshackle Mr. Rourke. Immediately. Case dismissed." The bailiff moved with frantic haste. The key turned in the steel cuffs. The heavy chains fell to the floor with a loud, metallic clatter that sounded like freedom. Damien Rourke stood up, rubbing his raw, bleeding wrists. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the gallery, where spectators were now standing, tears streaming down their faces, hands covering their mouths in realized horror. He turned to leave, but a small, joyous voice stopped him. "Daddy Bear!" Lily didn't wait. She launched herself from the edge of the witness box. Damien caught her in midair, his reflexes sharp and gentle. He scooped her up against his chest, his tattooed arms forming a cradle that looked safer than any bank vault. She wrapped her tiny arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Damien closed his eyes, and for the first time, he smiled, a genuine, heartbreaking smile of pure relief. He rested his cheek on top of her head, rocking her gently. The monster held the child, and finally the world saw the truth. The tattoos weren't warnings. They were battle scars from protecting the innocent. As he carried her out of the courtroom into the warm sunlight of a free afternoon, Lily laughed, safe at last in the arms of her hero. If you believe true heroes are defined by their hearts and not their appearance, smash that like button and share this story. Let's prove that love always wins.